This week, as I was preparing today's Sunday school lesson, I became very introspective, and I'm not quite sure why. But when I came into this church today, into Little Rock Original Free Will Baptist Church, and I looked around at the empty pews, it would appear to you, if you could see them, that they're empty, but to me they're not. Because I can look back decades ago and I can see many people that I knew, men and women, that were so inspirational to me. And I can also see it generational in that this person's grandparent is now gone, and their parents may be gone, but the grandchildren are. And I say with a little bit of chagrin that I probably never told these people how important they were in my life and in my faith. There are some, as I became a semi-adult and I served on some boards with some of them, that I told them how important they were and how they influenced me positively. And so I would recommend that we all do that. And now I am, statistically, I am in that winter of my life, and I don't know when I will be that empty pew and maybe remembered for a short while, but after a while probably not at all, or not knowing me. But today, in today's Sunday school lesson, we have two men that have been known for hundreds, if not thousands, of years ago, and how important they are in our faith. The first is Elijah, Elijah, and the second one, to whom he served as a mentor, is Elisha, Elisha. And by the way, my middle name is Eli, so I'll throw myself into that group for no apparent reason, just to let you know what my middle name is. But Elijah was a prophet in the Old Testament, but his name keeps popping up over time, even in the New Testament. In Matthew, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" And they responded to him, "Some say that you are John the Baptist," which was ironic in the fact that John the Baptist was still living earlier on in their lives. "Some say that you are Elijah." Huh? "Some Jeremiah or one of the prophets." There was some feeling that Elijah would come back before the second coming of Christ. And then on the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus went and he displayed his heavenly body and persona to his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John. And then there was the appearance of two heavenly people. One, Moses, the lawgiver to Israel, and the second, Elijah. Elijah. And so Elijah holds a very important part of our spiritual growth. Also, during Elijah's time as a prophet, he was a prophet of a very wicked king, King Ahab, and an equal to or greater than evil woman, his wife, Jezebel. And Jezebel worshipped the god Baal, B-A-L, and she tried everything she could to refute the God of Israel, the covenant God, Yahweh. And she, along with Ahab, tried to drive the people of Israel and the people around them away from worshiping anyone except for Baal. And if you remember, one of the more famous things that happened in the life of Elijah was when he had a contest with the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel, C-A-R-M-E-L. And if you remember, they were trying to call the prophets of Baal to set fire to the altar, and they yelled and yelled, and Elijah said, you might want to yell a little louder, they might be asleep. And of course they failed, and Elijah called to God, the only true God, and the wood in the altar, along with water that had doused it, was suddenly set on fire. Elijah didn't do it, but in God's response to Elijah, God did it. And when all of this had taken place and Elijah glorified God, God told him to pass the mantle and outward cloak, symbolizing the status that he had as the number one prophet in Israel. He anointed, he gave the mantle on Elisha's shoulders. Now, Elisha and Elijah were not related, but they did have this time. Elijah had his time in the ministry. The title of the lesson today is Taken Up and Left Behind. And this gives some thought. You remember a few years ago, there was a popular series of books, the Left Behind series. It has nothing to do with the second coming, but it does have something to do with Elijah, God calling Elijah up. And we see beginning in chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 of 2 Kings, it says, Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind. Now, Elijah ministry was about to end. And as I alluded to before, everyone that comes to this church, at some point in time, their ministries are going to end. Now, what do we do at this point? Many churches have failed to do this. So many churches are failing. I see this as a challenge to all of us because I have seen it in a business where I worked that failed to do this when leaders of the organization were either aging out or going to retire or was going to find a job. They failed to prepare their predecessors. No, that's not right. The ones that were going to follow them to fill their shoes. There's a country song, and I'm just thinking about this, I shouldn't be. This country song that said, I think George Jones sung this song, Who's Going to Fill Their Shoes? And he talks about Hank Williams and all of these people. Well, look around you if you're a fan at all to country music. I think the answer to it is nobody has decided to fill their shoes. And I pray for this church. I pray for the Church Universal that we choose to fill the shoes of those that lived and worked and died in this church to make it what it is today. In many ways, we're reaching more people. But I hope you know what I mean. And it says that God is going to take him up in a whirlwind. And Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Now, Gilgal simply means a circle. And I can't wait to tell my wife this, and she will shudder if she is listening to this video. She does not like roundabouts or traffic circles. And I personally love them because I can pull about 2 G's going around that circle to make my exit. But that's not the purpose of them. But here, circle means a circular altar made with stones. And as they were leaving, they had other prophets, about 50, following them. And Elijah said to Elisha, who had served as an apprentice for him. Now, Elisha's family was a farm family. And so, and when he became a follower of Elijah, he pretty much stayed behind the scenes. And Elijah tells him to stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel. Now, Elisha says, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. And this reminds me in the book of Ruth, where Ruth tells her mother-in-law, entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following you. For wherever you go, I will go. And your God will be my God. And this is what Elisha is saying to the prophet Elijah. I want to be with you. I want to go with you. What Elijah is saying is, I want to be alone. I want to contemplate and have introspective to what's going on, much like Jesus did when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. He wanted some time with himself and with God. So they went down to Bethel. Then Elijah said to him, again, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jordan. What he's doing is going to these places because he knows he's leaving soon to meet with the prophets that are there, to meet and let them know what's happening. And he said, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and were standing by the Jordan. Then again Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. Let me go back just for 1 second. The other prophets had told Elijah that they had heard that Elijah was going to be taken up into heaven and that he was going to leave him. And Elisha told them, I know what you're saying. I've heard it too, and I know. And he tells them to be silent. Don't talk about it anymore. Sometimes when we're having a major event to happen to us, like the death of a loved one, and we know it's forthcoming, and people are talking about it, don't you want to tell them sometimes, be quiet? I know it's true, but I don't want to hear it. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, God told Peter, James, and John, be silent. Be still and listen to Jesus Christ. So this is the time that intimate knowing that Elisha wanted to know Elijah. Just be quiet. I want to know all that I can know. Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. Now, what does this remind you of? Of Moses taking his rod and hitting the Red Sea and the water parting. Here Elijah is rolling up his mantle and hitting the water of the Jordan River, and the water parted to the one side and to the other, and the two crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you. When Jesus was leaving, it was important to him to know for the disciples to be equipped and prepared for his departure. And we know that they never quite understood that. And then Jesus told them that he would leave with them a comforter, the Holy Spirit. And then Pentecost happened. Here Elijah is wondering, what else can I do? Now, a casual reader or observer would misinterpret what I'm about to tell you. Elisha says, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit. It would seem that Elisha was asking for twice the material wealth that Elijah had, but no. In Leviticus, if you had two sons, the oldest son would get 2/3 of the inheritance. The youngest son would get 1/3. The reason why is because the oldest son was responsible for looking after the parent that's going to pass on. Look at the beauty of this. Elisha is saying, I want twice the inheritance. I want a double share of your spirit. You, Elijah, you have done a wonderful job. You have been obedient to God. I want to be that and more. I want to follow in your footsteps. I want to be obedient to God and lead the people away from worshiping pagan gods. God, help me. And Elisha says, Elisha responded, you have asked me for a hard thing. Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not. What is Elijah saying? If you see me leave this world and God calling me up, you will receive the spiritual inheritance for which you are asking. But it's not going to be given to you by me. It's going to be given to you by God. You will be blessed, Elisha, if you see me with your own eyes leaving. As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. I can't explain this except it's a miracle from God. The worshipers of Baal thought that Baal run around on the clouds in a chariot of clouds. Here God is showing his power that we have this whirlwind of fire for the chariots and the horses. Elisha kept watching what was happening, and he cried out, Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. Father was given recognition of the title that Elijah was the head of the prophetic guild. And Elijah could no longer see him. You know, you've ever watched a balloon or an airplane in the sky, and you watch it, and you watch it, and you lose sight of it, and you find it again, and then you can't see it anymore? That's probably what happened as he watched Elijah leave this earthly home. He picked up the mantle that Elijah had left behind and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle and struck the water like Elijah did. He says, "Where is the Lord? The God of Elijah, where is he?" Elisha was feeling alone and left behind. God, I need you, is what he was saying. And the prophets that were left across the water recognized that God had blessed Elisha. He struck the water again, and the water was parted to the one side and the other, and Elisha crossed back over to go back to Israel and serve as the number one prophet. Elisha didn't have nearly the success that Elijah had. He was prophet during the time of Ahaziah and Jehoram, and now he is King Joash, and he never actually led the people back to completely to God, but then he dies, and King Joash stands by his bed, and the king cries. When the king cries, it's not necessarily good news. The king cries, "My God, my Father, the chariots of Israel and his horsemen." He's saying that Elisha has now followed in the footsteps of Elijah. What this lesson is telling us, we all have unique ministries. Elijah had his ministry, Elisha has his. This person in his congregation had his, this one has his. And we need to support each other. And then finally, God is going to empower us to successfully complete our ministry if it's in his will to glorify him and his purposes. I want you to spend time this week with some introspection of asking yourself that we as a church and we as individuals, are we preparing others to follow us? And are we truly doing a ministry that is in accordance with the will of God? I pray that it is. Amen.